Out of every day that I have ever lived through, even with so many of them being so hard, there is one that stands out as the worst day of my entire life. It was my mother's 63rd birthday. The morning started just like any other. I helped my little girl get dressed and ready for school. It was supposed to be a big day for her. She had been practicing for her school spelling bee for weeks, and today was the day. The two of us were about to walk out the door when my husband grabbed me on the shoulder and stopped us before the door. "You can't let her go to school looking like that. She looks unkempt. What will people think when she's on stage?" I was going to just accept that he was right and change our daughter into some different clothes, but my mother, who was living with us at the time, had a bit of a grudge against my husband, and she wouldn't have it. It was her birthday after all.
Who do you think you're talking to? If you make my granddaughter late for school on the day of her recital, you got another thing coming. Go, baby, get out of here. Don't let that oaf tell you what to do.
My husband looked a little dumbstruck by my mother's resistance to his remark. He was usually the head of the household, and he would always get his way. But ever since my mother retired and started living with us, she had fought him for control over every little thing. I didn't want to be caught in the crossfire between the two of them on that day, so I just left like my mother told me to. I dropped my daughter off at school, then spent several hours running errands. Early in the afternoon, I got a call from my mother. For some reason, she was elated.
Huh. Today sure is a good day, dear. How's about you take your old lady out for some coffee and pastries for her birthday?
There wasn't really any way that I could say no. I might have married a controlling man, but I was born to an even more demanding and particular mother. So I put a hold on the grocery shopping I was about to do and met her at her favorite cafe in town, which was, of course, ridiculously overpriced and overrated. She ordered the most expensive things on the menu on my tab, then told me to take pictures of her holding them up to commemorate the occasion. When I asked for a bite, she said,
"Oh, give it a rest, honey. I've done enough for you today. I deserve this to myself."
I was confused by what she meant, but I didn't bother to ask. I heard my phone go off from my purse, and I welcomed the distraction. I'd gotten a text from my sister-in-law asking where my mother was. I replied that she was at the coffee house with me, but I didn't get a reply. Instead, about 15 minutes later, the police pulled up. They marched inside with forlorn faces and told us to follow them to the police station, but they wouldn't tell us why. Now, I understand that they didn't want to make a scene at the place of business. When we got to the station, we were met by a man in a suit who spoke to us softly. "Hello, ma'ams. I have some very unfortunate news. If you would, I'd like to talk to one of you at a time in this room here. The other can sit in the waiting room with your family."
Oh, let me go first. It's my birthday.
Sure. Come with me, ma'am. And so, my mother disappeared into a windowless room with that man, as I was ushered into a larger waiting room, where I found my entire family of in-laws sitting in quiet, sobbing despair. I asked them,
Do any of you know what's going on?
but none of them answered. They just looked at me with daggers in their tearful eyes. Confused, I found a seat away from them, up against the wall that was shared with the room my mother had just been taken into. I was soon to find out that that room was purposed for interrogations and had an extremely thin wall. "Something terrible happened today, ma'am. Your son-in-law has passed away.
Huh? What'd you say?
Your daughter's husband has been killed." In that moment, my world collapsed. I'd just seen my husband alive a few hours ago, but now he was gone. I couldn't think of a single person who would want to hurt him, but then it hit me. The last person I'd left him alone with was my own mother.
So he's dead?
Yes, he was killed. He was shot a dozen times in his own home.
Yay! Happy birthday to me. I did it, I did it.
Everything after that is just a blur. They called my daughter out of school and made us go in the room with my mother. I remember her saying something like,
Aren't you so happy, baby? You're free now. No more of that jerk hanging around.
but there was nothing I could say. I'm still struggling to recover from that day, almost 10 years ago. I just can't believe how deranged she became, that she would do something so despicable and then celebrate it. She even made me take her out to lunch afterwards. I know I didn't marry a perfect man, but she had no right to do what she did. We could have worked things out, but now none of that is possible. But over everything else, it's my daughter I pray for. For her grandmother to take away her father like that and act like she was doing her a favor. I just don't understand what snapped in that woman's mind.
What did you think of him? Okay, and why do you say that?
That's the big thumbs down. You didn't like him.
I want to tell you that just within the last 30 minutes, the judge did rule that there is now enough evidence for Cynthia Sitabaka to stand trial for murder.
Is he dead? You tell me. He's gotta be dead. Is he dead?
He's dead, man.
Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Oh boy, oh boy. Good, 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 good. Oh, thank you, thank you.
Did you check to see if he was doing it?
I didn't care.
I'm a professional photographer by trade, but I've had a few side hustles in the past. I'm also sort of a fanatic for the paranormal, which has led me down a number of photographic rabbit holes, but strictly as a hobby. I never get paid for attempting to actually photograph real ghosts. However, some years ago, I did combine those interests into an obscure side hustle that ended up getting me into trouble. Basically, I'd take pictures of grieving family members, then Photoshop images of their deceased loved ones into the photographs. It was never my favorite gig, not only because it involved the fabrication of the ghosts that I was trying to find proof of, but mainly because I always had the nagging thought in the back of my mind that said it was taking advantage of people who were struggling with the loss of their loved ones. But all those people willingly responded to my ad. I never charged them much, just enough to make ends meet, so I continued to do it. Unfortunately, there was one client who forced me to stop. From the very beginning, I was getting strange feelings about their request. But at that point, I was already starting to get the idea into my head that I was really helping these people with their grieving process somehow. She called me around midnight with a strange excitement in her voice. "You've reached Sunday Morning Photography. How may I produce your memorable photos?"
Hi, I saw your ad on Facebook. How much do you charge for a funeral photography session?
Well, the usual rate is $100 for an hour-long shoot. About 2 weeks until you receive your 5 finished photographs.
Can you get them to me by Monday if I give you $500?
Sure.
Great, I'll text you the details.
I was a little flabbergasted. $500 for an hour on camera and 4 hours in the Photoshop was better than my professional rate at the time. I didn't really question why she needed them so fast, but I thought it was weird that she didn't even tell me who had died. Though, within minutes she'd send over a dozen text messages, really long and drawn out blocks of text, detailing how distraught and depressed she was due to the sudden death of her 2-year-old daughter, and how she didn't want to talk about it over the phone. Before I even had time to type the words, "my condolences," she completely switched into business mode. She gave me a detailed list of the kinds of photos she wanted, how she wanted them composed, which pictures of her daughter she wanted to use, and how. Just a lot of very specific requirements that grieving people wouldn't usually care about. Most of the time, they're too preoccupied with grief itself to deal with the details. After all, a professional gets paid for the details. But this woman was something else. She had what she wanted in mind, and she wouldn't accept anything different in the slightest. All that said, because she was paying me so much, I ignored the feeling of suspicion in my gut and met her the very next morning. She told me to meet her at a certain cemetery, which led me to believe that we'd be taking photos at her daughter's grave. Then she asked me,
Which one of these gravestones would look best for the photo shoot?
You mean your daughter hasn't been buried yet?
No. I told you, I'm getting these photos for her service. Now, answer the question.
From that point on, I didn't ask any questions. We walked together through the cemetery until she found a random gravestone that she liked. That's when I began the photo shoot. She was the most nitpicky, particular customer I've ever had. I nearly filled up an entire SD card with duplicate pictures because the tiniest thing was out of place, or she didn't have the right facial expression. The whole time I was just hoping that the family of whoever this gravestone belonged to didn't show up and start screaming at us. This woman even had a book as a prop. I think it was titled The Giving Tree. She made me take a photo every second as she read the entire thing to her dead daughter, who wasn't even there. Then, after the hour of the photo shoot was over, she held me up for another hour as she scrolled through all of the hundreds of photos and picked out the 5 that she wanted produced. After she was finally gone, I purchased a few energy drinks and went home to pull an all-nighter to get all of her pictures done before the next morning. Honestly, I just wanted to be done with this client and claim my money. Thankfully, she didn't hassle me about the quality of the Photoshop upon delivery. That's what most people had issues with, but she didn't care. I saw the money hit my bank account and I thought I was finally done with that horrible woman. But I sure wasn't. A few days later, I got a knock on my door. The kind of banging that sounds like someone's trying to beat down your door, that makes you shoot out of bed in your underwear. I answered the door to 2 men in suits who held up their badges as they introduced themselves. "Good morning, sir. We are homicide investigators from the state. We have a few questions we'd like to ask you. You're not under arrest, but we'd like you to come into the local station." Sure. I haven't done anything wrong, so it shouldn't take long. But of course, I was there all day. My side gig had gotten me wrapped up in a murder case. That awful witch had taken advantage of me. She was under suspicion of murdering her own daughter, and she had me take those photos to make her look innocent, like she was grieving and yearning for her lost daughter, when she was the one that killed her. That incident ruined my reputation. From that moment on, I never did another one of those gigs. I never should have done them to begin with.
She used my work to make people think that she's innocent.
What did she want in the photos?
She told me that her daughter's favorite book was The Giving Tree. And she said, I want me holding the book, reading it to my daughter Macy, who passed away, and I want to be looking down at her while she's reading the book. She wanted this more than any other photo. When I look at that photo now, I see, Mommy, why'd you do this?
Almost everyone has an ex, and when you get into a relationship with someone, everyone gives at least a moment of thought to the other people their new partner has been with, because you know they're thinking about yours. My wife and I are no exception. Well, I should say my ex-wife and I were no exception. I've recently had to divorce my partner of nearly 15 years. I definitely didn't see it coming, though I guess I should have. But despite how quickly the decision was made, I still feel confident in my judgment. By the time we met, we had both been in the dating game for a while. And looking back on it now, it seems obvious to me that both of us at that point were more interested in finding someone good enough to settle down with, rather than finding the perfect someone, or whatever naive single people say. We both had our runs with narcissists, clingers, nutcases, and a few other flavors of insufferable people. But we each seem refreshingly normal to the other, so none of that history made a difference. Man, I should have paid a little more attention. Before we were married, my ex-wife would talk every now and then about this guy named Jason. Out of all her exes, he was the one she'd gotten closest with. They were together for a few years, and they even lived together. To be honest, I'm not sure I ever heard her say anything that bad about him, except that he had some strange habits and beliefs. When I asked why they broke up, she said something that I always thought was weird.
He moved to Tibet and became a monk. He said that money was the root of evil or something like that.
When she said that, the identity of this Jason guy clicked in my mind. I used to hear about him in secondary school, how he was always blurting out strange things in class, or sitting by himself every day at lunch. And generally just flying a lot of red flags, like bringing razors to school to shave his head in the washroom. Wait, you mean Buzzcut Jason? You dated him?
Yeah? So? What's wrong with dating the weird kid?
Because if you date the weird kid, that means you're also weird.
Oh, grow up. It's not like he was violent or anything. I felt bad for him, so I gave him a chance. He actually turned out to be really nice. Until he dumped me to go meditate himself into the grave.
That should have been my first red flag, but she managed to talk me out of suspicion. By all my means of judgment, Jason had really fallen off the face of the earth. Nobody I knew from secondary school had heard from him in years, and my ex-wife was the only one who claimed to know where he'd gone. For all I knew, she was right. Jason had relocated his life to Central Asia to practice Tibetan Buddhism, giving up everything he'd ever had in the process. Certainly that's not something you hear every day, but it's not something you never hear. And after my ex and I got engaged, Jason was never mentioned again. I didn't care anyway. What's one piece of baggage on an otherwise normal person? Unfortunately, that wasn't quite the end of it. I think that most people tend to get suspicious of their partner's loyalty at times. But I never thought I'd be one to have so many reasons to doubt it. I almost went crazy, thinking I was being overly paranoid about all the weird stuff going on. Coming home a few minutes early and seeing my wife out of breath for no reason. Hearing doors slam just before I got inside the house. Her rarely ever letting me go inside her car, and staying out super late on weekdays. I told myself those paranoid sensations were just the scars of being cheated on in university by other women. I thought once we started raising our family that it would all be put to rest. But then, our first child came out with bright ginger hair. My ex-wife is a natural blonde, and I've got regular old brown hair. I can still remember how it felt when that pit formed in my stomach. There was an intense discussion right then. Neither of us are redheaded, Jane. That's a recessive gene that nobody in my family shows, and you can't carry it because you're blonde. Explain to me how that happened.
Oh my god, I can't believe you. You didn't even know my natural hair color is auburn? It's like you don't even know me. Maybe you cheated and you just want to shift the blame on me.
Oh, come on. How'd you come to that conclusion?
Enough of this! If you keep questioning me, I'm divorcing you and taking everything you have.
And that was how she got me. Holding the word divorce over my head like a guillotine. I always feared becoming one of those old lonely divorcees who spend every night at the pub. More than anything, I didn't want that to become me. So begrudgingly I dropped the issue, and made extra sure that the next kid was mine. But things never got easier. Those suspicions of mine never stopped getting stirred up by one thing or another. It started to get to me. Over time, I think I degraded mentally. Just from the stress and distrust that I was forced to live with for so many years. When we had our fourth kid, she told me that she was going to quit her job and become a housewife.
Well, one of us has to stay home to take care of all four of them, and you make more money, so it should be me. You don't really have paternal instincts anyway.
And to commemorate the moment, she wanted a photo taken of the six of us. We all crammed together on the couch, and I tried my best to put on my happiest smile for the camera. She posted it to her Facebook page as she updated her employment status. I didn't think much of it as I was exhausted from work. I was ready to go to sleep, especially since I had to get up early the following morning. When I woke up, my phone was blowing up with messages on Facebook, and they all said the same thing. Who's that guy on the couch that you guys are sitting on? The one right under your wife? I had no idea what they were talking about, but I had to take a closer look at the picture. And that's when I saw a face I hadn't seen in over 10 years. Jason, Buzzcut Jason, lying under some kind of blanket, acting as a cushion for my whole family to sit on. And just from the way my ex was sitting on his face, I knew that he'd been the one she was cheating with all those years. I couldn't handle all the lies. He never went to Tibet to become a monk. He moved into her basement and became a bum. I never knew he was ginger because he always kept his head shaved. All the times I was suspicious and she tried to gaslight me. I'm not even sure a single one of those kids are mine. How many times did I narrowly miss an encounter with him? Was I ever safe? I didn't want to know. I divorced that wench at the first chance I got. And I may have become one of those lonely old pub regulars. But I'll tell you one thing. I still feel sound in my judgment.